Today, the Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton, came to Chinatown. She visited the Chinese American Museum, Chicago American Service League, talked with some small business owners, and answered to their shared concerns.
Castle is the only AAPI serving nonprofit in Illinois that has a dedicated diversity professional. So doing some sustainable policies and efforts that really help us sort of empower our staff members and our community members to be change agents, right? And sort of help us to advocate and amplify the voices of food.
And the bottom line is, when we talk about equity, all of us have played a role in making sure that we have access to the land and everything else, the food sources.
So we want to work with everyone, so that if there is an incident.
Well, first of all, I'm back in Chinatown. One of the things that I like to do and am honored to do as Lieutenant Governor is travel the state and lift up so many communities. It's important to me and to Governor Pritzker that we connect with our communities and the people that we represent. And it's been wonderful to learn not only about Chinese American history and culture, but here at Castle to learn about the many needs and services being provided to the Chinese American community.
Yeah, that's wonderful to have you here.
It's been great.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful news that we heard from the state that there's a newly announced a loan to the small businesses that to help the people who struggle during and due to pandemic. So why it is important to get this money out and how to really get this money out, particularly to this community?
Well, all throughout this pandemic, these last 18 months have been incredibly hard on our small businesses. And Governor Pritzker and I know that small businesses are really the lifeblood of our communities. These are people who decided to put their resources into starting a business right in their community, and now they're generating an economy within that community. So that's very important, not just for the services, but for job creation. The pandemic has hit our small businesses hard, and so the governor has worked very hard alongside of our Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to make sure that resources are available. The Back to Business grants, previous to that, it was the business interruption grants, because we know that by giving resources to our businesses, it helps them keep their doors open, helps them to get over this hump that we're experiencing during this pandemic, and help them to continue to grow and thrive. So one of the things that's been important to the governor and I is making sure that equity is at the center. I think more than 50% of the grants that we've doled out has been to businesses owned by people of color, and 21% from the AAPI community. So it's important that businesses all throughout our state in every community are able to have these resources that they need to succeed.
Well, 50%, that's very celebrating numbers to hear.
Well, it's what happens when you are intentional about equity.
Yes.
You have to make sure that you say, this is what's important, and that's what you see when you focus on equity.
Right, the focus on that. Yeah. It's hard to ask, but it is kind of disturbing for a lot of small business owners that in the last couple of years, there's a disturbing rise of hate crimes against this AAPI community, and that's turbulence for the individuals as well as the small business owners. So how is the government working to combat this trend?
Well, it's something that I have heard from so many small business owners. It was certainly part of our conversation at the Chinese American Museum, that when you look at the history, you see that we are seeing history repeat itself. And there's a lot of history that has never been taught in our schools about the Chinese American community and some of the racism and other barriers that they have faced throughout history. And so one of the things that has happened is, first and foremost, thanks to the leadership of the Asian American Caucus of the Illinois General Assembly, who has pushed to make sure that we can strengthen hate crime laws, something that the governor and I both support. But also, the TEACH Act was signed into law as well by Governor Pritzker. And this is an opportunity to make sure that Asian American history and culture is taught in our schools. If we want to make sure that we don't repeat the history of the past that has been so painful to the Chinese American community and so many other AAPI communities, we have to make sure people know what happened. And unfortunately, it's not taught in our schools.
Yeah.
And so now under the TEACH Act here in Illinois, we are leading the way. We'll make sure that history and culture is taught of Chinese American and other AAPI communities right in the school system. And when people learn that history, it's going to help reduce bigotry and hatred,
Yeah.
and hopefully help the next generation
Right.
grow up differently.
Yeah, to bring to light that there are contributions throughout the histories to
Absolutely.
the American countries.
There's been so many contributions by the Chinese American community into the state of Illinois, but also to our entire country.
Exactly.
But too often we don't talk about it. Too often it's been erased.
Absolutely.
We're not going to do that
Yeah,
anymore.
that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to hear. Well, I recently moved from overseas, and one thing that I heard, very unfortunate, that the crime in Chicago seems to be escalating. So I just want to know what can be done from the state level to curb it in this community and in the city as a whole.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'll just say that we are seeing, unfortunately, violence rise not only in cities like the city of Chicago, but in cities all across the state and in cities all across the country during this pandemic. And it's unfortunate. The way that the governor and I typically look at this is as a public health crisis. And what that means is we have to really focus on the resources that are going to communities and really address the root causes. You know, here at Castle, we've talked about the fact that there are too many communities experiencing food insecurity or a lack of housing, or people who have barriers to being able to buy a house or get a job. All of these things are the same kinds of barriers that exist where we see high rates of violence. So to really address the issue of violence, yes, there are things that we need to do in how we respond to violence. But my question is always, let's do more to stop it in the first place. And that comes by addressing the underlying root causes of violence in our communities. So we're focused on putting resources into these communities. I lead what's called the Restore, Reinvest, and Renew Board, R3. And we are investing in violence prevention, economic development, youth development, all sorts of services and programs to make sure that every community is safe and every person in our state has the ability to live in a safe community.
Yeah, also the GEO initiative that you try to stop the crime from happening by going tackle the problems at the first place, and also help them to resolve the problems after they come out of this. Yeah, I think that, yeah, that would be wonderful.
That's right. So there are people, you know, if we look at what's happening with our justice system, we have so many people that have gone into the justice system. Unfortunately, that hasn't made every single community safe, right?
Yeah.
So we have to think about when people come out of that system, how do we make sure that they have access to mental health services, to housing, to health care, to jobs, all of those things so that they can be rooted in the community, be productive, and make sure that they are contributing to the community rather than doing anything that might hurt or harm the community.
They have the choice not to go back to the past.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, wonderful. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, for spending time with the CASN TV. Well, I think that's the questions we have.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great day, and I look forward to continuing to visit in Chinatown.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Lieutenant Governor's suggestion of educating the public about Chinese contribution to America throughout the history seems to provide a practical solution to the current issue of a rising hate crime against the Asian community. The state loan to be launched soon to assist small business owners that struggle due to pandemic is also a good news to many here in Chinatown. We look forward to the facilitation of both policies soon. This is Chun of CSN TV.